Seneca, on anger. 7. May it not be that, although anger be not natural, it may be right to adopt it, because it often proves itself useful? It rouses the spirit and excites it, and courage does nothing grand in war without it, unless its flame be supplied from this source. This is the goad which stirs up bold men and sends them to encounter perils. Some, therefore, consider it to be best to control anger, not to banish it utterly, but to cut off its extravagances, and force it to keep within useful bounds, so as to retain that part of it without which action will become languid, and all strength and activity of mind will die away. In the first place, it is easier to banish dangerous passions than to rule them. It is easier not to admit them than to keep them in order when admitted. For when they have established themselves in possession of the mind, they are more powerful than the lawful ruler, and will in no wise permit themselves to be weakened or abridged. In the next place, reason herself, who holds the reins, is only strong while she remains apart from these passions. If she mixes and befouls herself with them, she becomes no longer able to restrain those whom she might once have cleared out of her path. For the mind, when once excited and shaken up, goes whither the passions drive it. There are certain things whose beginnings lie in our own power, but which, when developed, drag us along by their own force and leave us no retreat. Those who have flung themselves over a precipice have no control over their movements, nor can they stop or slacken their pace when once started, for their own headlong rashness has left no room for either reflection or remorse, and they cannot help but going to lengths which they might have avoided. So, also the mind, when it has abandoned itself to anger, love, or any other passion, is unable to check itself. Its own weight and the downward tendency of vices must carry the man off and hurl him into the lowest depth. 8. The best plan is to reject straight away the first incentives to anger, to resist its very beginnings, and to take care not to be betrayed into it. For if once it begins to carry us away, it is hard to get back again into a healthy condition, because reason goes for nothing when once passion has been admitted to the mind, and has by our own free will been given a certain authority. It will for the future do as much as it chooses, not only as much as you will allow it. The enemy, I repeat, must be met and driven back at the outermost frontier line, for once it has entered the city and passed its gates, he will not allow his prisoners to set bounds to his victory. The mind does not stand apart and view its passions from without, so as not to permit them to advance further than they ought, but it is itself changed into a passion, and is therefore unable to check what was once useful and wholesome strength, now that it has become degenerate and misapplied. For passion and reason, as I said before, have not distinct and separate provinces, but consist of the changes of the mind itself for better or for worse. How then can reason recover itself when it is conquered and held down by vices, when it is given away to anger? Or how can it extricate itself from a confused mixture, the greater part of which consists of the lower qualities? But, argues our adversary, some men when in anger control themselves. Do they so far control themselves that they do nothing which anger dictates, or somewhat? If they do nothing thereof, it becomes evident that anger is not essential to the conduct of affairs, although your sect advocated it as possessing greater strength than reason. Finally, I ask, is anger stronger or weaker than reason? If stronger, how can reason impose any check upon it, since it is only the less powerful that obey? If weaker, then reason is competent to effect its ends without anger, and does not need the help of a less powerful quality. But some angry men remain consistent and control themselves. When do they do so? It is when their anger is disappearing and leaving them of its own accord, not when it was red hot. For when it was more powerful than they, what then? Do not men even in the height of their anger sometimes let their enemies go while whole and unhurt, and refrain from injuring them? They do. But when do they do so? It is when passion overpowers another, and either fear or greed gets the upper hand for a while. On such occasions, it's not thanks to reason that anger is stilled, but owing to an untrustworthy and fleeting truce between the passions. 9. In the next place, anger has nothing useful in itself, and does not rouse up to the mind warlike deeds. For a virtue, being self-sufficient, never needs the assistance of a vice. Whenever it needs an impetuous effort, it does not become angry, but rises to the occasion, and excites or soothes itself as far as it deems requisite, just as the machines which hurl darts may be twisted to a greater or lesser degree of tension at the manager's pleasure. Anger, says Aristotle, is necessary, nor can any fight be won without it, unless it fills the mind and kindles up the spirit. It must, however, be made use of, not as a general, but as a soldier. Now this is untrue, for if it listens to reason and follows whither reason leads, it is no longer anger, whose characteristic is obstinacy. If, again, it is disobedient, and will not be quiet when ordered, but is carried away by its own willful and headstrong spirit, it is then as useless an aid to the mind as a soldier who disregards the sounding of the retreat would be to a general. If, therefore, anger allows limits to be imposed upon it, it must be called by some other name, and ceases to be anger, which I understand it to be unbridled and unmanageable. And if it does not allow limits to be imposed upon it, it is harmful and not to be counted among aids. Wherefore, either anger is not anger, or it is useless. For if any man demands the infliction of punishment, not because he is eager for the punishment itself, but because it is right to inflict it, he ought not to be counted as an angry man. That will be the useful soldier, who knows how to obey orders. The passions cannot obey any more than they can command. 10. For this cause, reason will never call to its aid blind and fierce impulses, over whom she herself possesses no authority, and which she can never restrain save by setting them against similar and equally powerful passions, as, for example, fear against anger, anger against sloth, greed against timidity. May virtue never come to such a pass that reason should fly for aid to vices. The mind can find no safe repose here. It must be shaken and tempest-tossed if it is to be safe only among its own defects. If it cannot be brave without anger, diligent without greed, quiet without fear, such is the despotism under which a man must live if he becomes the slave of a passion. Are you not ashamed to put virtues under the patronage of vices? Then, too, reason ceases to have any power if she can do nothing without passion, and begins to be equal and like unto passion. For what difference is there between them if passion without reason be as rash as reason without passion is helpless? They are both on the same level, if one cannot exist without the other. Yet who can endure that passion should be made equal to reason? Then, says our adversary, passion is useful, provided it be moderate. No, only if it be useful by nature. But if it is disobedient to authority and reason, all that we gain by its moderation is the less there is of it, the less harm it does. Wherefore, a moderate passion is nothing but a moderate evil. 11. But, argues he, against our enemies anger is necessary. In no case is it less necessary, since our attacks ought to not be disorderly, but regulated and under control. What, indeed, is it except anger so ruinous to itself that overthrows barbarians, who have so much more bodily strength than we, and are so much better able to endure fatigue? Gladiators, too, protect themselves by skill, but expose themselves to wounds when they are angry. Moreover, of what use is anger when the same end can be arrived at by reason? Do you suppose that a hunter is angry at the beasts that he kills? Yet he meets them when they attack him, and follows them when they flee from him, all of which is managed by reason without anger. So, when many thousands of Cimbri and Teutones poured over the Alps, what was it that caused them to perish so completely, that no messenger, only common rumor, carried the news of that great defeat to their homes, except that with them anger stood in the place of courage? And anger, although sometimes it overthrows and breaks to pieces whatever it meets, yet is more often its own destruction. Who can be braver than the Germans? Who charge more boldly? Who have more love of arms, among which they are born and bred, for which alone they care, to neglect of everything else? Who can be more hardened to undergo every hardship, since a large part of them have no store of clothing for the body, no shelter from the continual rigor of the climate? Yet Spaniards and Gauls, and even the unwarlike races of Asia and Syria, cut them down before the main legion comes within sight, nothing but their own irascibility exposing them to death. Give but intelligence to those minds, and discipline to those bodies of theirs, which now are ignorant of vicious refinements, luxury, and wealth. To say nothing more, we should certainly be obliged to go back to the ancient Roman habits of life. By what did Fabius restore the shattered forces of the state, except by knowing how to delay and spin out of time, which angry men know not how to do? The empire, which then was at its last gasp, would have perished if Fabius had been as daring as anger urged him to be. But he took thought about the condition of the affairs, and after counting his force, no part of which could be lost without everything being lost with it, he laid aside the thoughts of grief and revenge, turning his sole attention to what was profitable and making the most of his opportunities, and conquered his anger before he conquered Hannibal. What did Scipio do? Did he not leave behind Hannibal and the Carthaginian army, and all with whom he had a right to be angry, and carry over the war into Africa with such deliberation that he made his enemies think him luxurious and lazy? What did the second Scipio do? Did he not remain a long, long time before Numantia, and bear with calmness the reproach to himself and to his country that Numantia took longer to conquer than Carthage? By blockading and investing his enemies, he brought them to such straits that they perished by their own swords. Anger, therefore, is not useful even in wars or battles, for it is prone to rashness, and while trying to bring others into danger, does not guard itself against danger. The most trustworthy virtue is that which long and carefully considers itself, controls itself, and slowly and deliberately brings itself to the front. 12. What then, asks our adversary, is a good man not to be angry if he sees his father murdered or his mother outraged? No, he will not be angry, but he will avenge them, or protect them. Why do you fear that piety will not prove a sufficient spur to him even without anger? You may as well say, what then? When a good man sees his father or son being cut down, I suppose he will not weep or faint. The good man will do his duty without disturbance or fear, and he will perform the duty of a good man, so as to do nothing unworthy of a man. My father will be murdered, then I will defend him. He has been slain, then I will avenge him, not because I am grieved, but because it is my duty. Good men are made angry by injuries done to their friends. When you say this, Theophrastus, you seek to throw discredit upon more manly maxims. You leave the judge and appeal to the mob, because everyone is angry when such things befall his own friends. You suppose that men will decide that it is their duty to do what they do, for as a rule every man considers the passion which he recognizes to be a righteous one. But he does the same thing if the hot water is not ready for his drink, if a glass be broken, or his shoe splashed with mud. It is not piety, but weakness of mind that produces this anger, as children weep when they lose their parents, just as they do when they lose their toys. To feel anger on behalf of one's friends does not show a loving, but a weak mind. It is admirable and worthy conduct to stand forth as the defender of one's parents, children, friends, and countrymen at the call of duty itself, acting of one's own free will, forming a deliberate judgment, and looking forward to the future, not in an impulsive, frenzied fashion. No passion is more eager for revenge than anger, and for that very reason it is unapt to obtain it, being over-hasty and frantic. Like almost all it desires, it hinders itself in the attainment of its own object, and therefore has never been useful in peace or war. For it makes peace like war, and when in arms forgets that Mars belongs to neither side, and falls into the power of the enemy, because it is not its own. In the next place, vices ought not to be received into common use because on some occasions they have affected somewhat. Also, fevers are good for certain kinds of ill health, but nevertheless it is better to be altogether free from them. It is a hateful mode of cure to owe one's health to disease. Similarly, although anger, like poison, or falling headlong, or being shipwrecked, may have unexpectedly done good, yet it ought not on that account to be classed as wholesome, for poisons have often proved good for the health. 13. Moreover, qualities which we ought to possess become better and more desirable the more extensive they are. If justice is a good thing, no one would say it would be better if any part were subtracted from it. If bravery is a good thing, no one would wish it to be in any way curtailed. Consequently, the greater anger is, the better it is, for whoever objected to a good thing being increased? But it is not expedient that anger should be increased. Therefore, it is not expedient that it should exist at all, for that which grows bad by increase cannot be a good thing. Anger is useful, says our adversary, because it makes men more ready to fight. According to that mode of reasoning, then, drunkenness is also a good thing, for it makes men insolent and daring, and many use their weapons better when worse for the liquor. No, according to that reasoning, also, you may call frenzy and madness essential to strength, because madness often makes men stronger. Why, does not fear often, by the rule of contraries, make men bolder? And does not the terror of death rouse up even arrogant cowards to join battle? Yet anger, drunkenness, fear, and the like are base and temporary incitements to action, and can furnish no arms to virtue, which has no need of vices, although they may at times be of little assistance to sluggish and cowardly minds. No man becomes braver through anger, except one who without anger would not have been brave at all. Anger does not therefore come to assist courage, but to take its place. What are we to say to the argument that, if anger were a good thing, it would attach itself to all the best men? Yet the most irascible of creatures are infants, old men, and sick people. Every weakling is naturally prone to complaint.